In this Mexican city, unimaginable crimes have been committed. Everyone who lives here knows about them, but no one is doing anything to stop them. Except for desperate families who hang flyers on the streetlights. They're searching for their daughters who've been kidnapped by human traffickers. This victim was 14 years old. Her body was found buried in the desert underneath a pile of rocks and rubbish. For Silvia Rosas and Maria Cardona, it's a day of both hope and despair. It could be one of their children who's been discovered, or her body might be nearby. But this time it's somebody else's child who's been found dead. Their search continues. A lawyer working pro bono on these cases is Santiago Gonzalez. He knows the situation well. We're talking about more than 100 kidnapped girls in Ciudad Juarez in the last year alone, he tells me. Most of them are forced into prostitution. The police haven't solved one single case. Not one of them has been freed. Many of them stay lost forever. With others, their bones may be found later in the Juarez Valley. The desert around Ciudad Juarez has become a graveyard for the bodies of countless girls and young women. Mexico's organized crime gangs have expanded operations beyond the drug trade. Now they trade in people too, and it's lucrative. In this poor region close to the US border, there are plenty of customers. Mothers of missing girls go to where bodies have been found, searching for clues that could lead them to their own children. Maria was 18 when she was kidnapped. Paola was 16. Maria's mother tells me that they can't give up the search for their children, even in terrible places like this. Perhaps we'll find our daughter, she says, or one of the many others who've gone missing in Juarez. Paola's mother tells me she hopes that this will stop one day. She says the perpetrators don't really fear the justice system, but maybe a higher justice will stop them. That, at least, is her hope. As they're about to leave the hillside, the searchers discover something, blood-stained underwear beneath a rock. It could mean that there are more corpses nearby. Santiago Gonzalez informs the police, but initially they do nothing. Ciudad Juarez is rife with kidnapping, forced prostitution and murder. But the reach of violent crime extends all the way to the tourist areas on the Pacific and Caribbean coasts and to the capital, Mexico City. Raids are often televised, but they bring few results. Many believe police, judiciary and lawmakers are involved in the criminal underworld. The case of Marisela Escobedo caused a huge outcry in Mexico. She was a mother who found out who'd murdered her daughter, Ruby. The man was jailed, but later a judge released him. She protested outside the government building. And in full view of the security cameras, he shot and killed her. And then he escaped. Jose and Marta Castillo know how dangerous the criminals can be. But that hasn't stopped them from trying to find their daughter Esmeralda. They've printed her face on fake banknotes to get people's attention. One day, 5 years ago, Esmeralda simply didn't come home from school. She was 14 years old. Her father tells passers-by that she was very young and pretty. He says somebody must have seen something. He's determined not to give up his search. He tells us they got little help from the authorities, so they decided to search themselves, as most other parents do. He says they put up pictures of their daughter in public places, like this square. But it's hard to make progress. There are hundreds of victims, and fear stops many people from talking about anything they've seen. There are no surveillance cameras here, says this man. Not one. The police protect the gangs and rake in money themselves. Everyone knows it, and nobody says anything. And you've noticed yourselves in your research. The police just put up obstacles in your way to stop you finding out the truth. Once, the daughter of a politician went missing. Police brought her home the very night she disappeared. But for girls from poor areas, things are different. And José and Marta Castillo live in a poor area. Esmeralda's father has learned that traffickers first win the trust of victims. Those who are less educated are easier prey. Many of the victims are sold into slavery in Mexico City or the United States. José tells me a man once rang him saying he was in Mexico City, sitting opposite the girl pictured on the banknote. He said she needed help. José heard screams through the phone and the sound of someone being beaten. He drove there straight away and searched everywhere, but didn't find her. In the vast heart of the capital, countless girls and women are held as slaves and kept for as long as they bring in money through forced prostitution. Few have the nerve to try to flee, says 24-year-old Madai Morales. Her kidnappers threatened to kill her family if she left. But she escaped from captivity with the help of a stranger and was then sheltered by an aid organization. When I drive along here, I see girls I used to stand next to, she says. Police often drive by and leer at the products, as they like to call them. They don't care that lots of the girls are underage. I find that so sad. There are only 4 shelters in the whole country for escaped victims. This one is for children. The youngest here is 6. It's not uncommon for boys and girls to be kidnapped and sold at that age. They're used as sex slaves until they become too unhealthy or fall into addiction and can't bring in money anymore. The unlucky ones then end up in the desert. But even those who manage to escape face serious problems. They need psychological help and education. The children are traumatized. Parents are overwhelmed, not knowing how to deal with the sexual trauma their children have been through. Rosy Orozco is the president of the Mexican Commission Against the Trafficking of Women. She says it's important not to make the mistake of calling the women prostitutes because they don't sell their bodies willingly. Criminals force them into prostitution, she says. They're treated violently and raped 30 to 40 times per day. Madai survived her ordeal. Now she lives with a friend who's been through the same experience. She's studying law and wants to use her skills to fight the traffickers. Her kidnappers were jailed for 20 years, but she had to sit for 2 days at the public prosecutor's office before anyone would listen to her story. It has to be made clear to men that women aren't products, she says. There isn't a for sale or for lease sign on us. I don't know when we lost our values, when it became okay for them to own us and treat us as if we belonged to them. Back in Ciudad Juarez, a group of parents are protesting against the authorities' failure to act. There aren't even any statistics about how many women are missing in Mexico. Aid organizations estimate there are 3 new cases every day. Silvia Rosas and Maria Cardona refuse to give up. They pay regular visits to the state prosecutor. To this day, they've never brought a child back, says Maria. All those they find are dead, all of them. I haven't given up hope that we will get our daughters back alive, but in 3 years, I haven't had even the smallest hint about what happened to my child. Usually, the mothers leave angrier than when they arrived. The officials say their track record in finding and returning missing women is good. But they quote figures on cases of domestic abuse, where women who run away from home are taken back by police.
No era esta, era otra. Y le dijeron que 72 horas tenía que...
The chief prosecutor of the state of Chihuahua seems helpless in the face of the reality.
Esta actividad conjunta y coordinada
en ciudades con millones de habitantes.
In cities with millions of inhabitants like Ciudad Juarez, he says, crimes like these always take place in the shadows, in the dark.
Quienes cometen los delitos actúan en la clandestinidad y a las sombras y en las tinieblas. Y buscan
Even if one looks, it's hard to get hold of those responsible. But if we ever do happen to find them, they will, of course, face justice. As we filmed, the mothers asked him what had been done about the bloodied underwear they found in the desert. Nothing so far. But the next day, we're invited to film a police action. They want us to film them taking decisive action. Even the chief prosecutor is there. It's no wonder that parents take matters into their own hands and look for their children themselves, even though they're risking their own lives. Jose Castillo hates places like this red light district, but he comes here often. He believes it's his best chance of finding Esmeralda. I'll keep looking, he says, because I have the feeling that my daughter is here in this city. He tells me that at the very beginning of his search, a policeman told him that the more he looked, the quicker his daughter would turn up dead. But now he asks, could he live and not look for her?